So let's just call a spade. Eddie's England are a hot mess. And I thought you were going to score.
Ask a better question, you get a better answer.
Hi guys, welcome back. So let's take a deep dive into England's autumn internationals. It was pretty woeful. Yes, they overcame an underpowered Japan, a young Japan, very well. But apart from 10 minutes against New Zealand, the rest was a bit of a disaster and a bit of a hot mess, really. So I'm going to try and unpick it. I'm going to try and get rid of as much emotion as I can, which is quite tricky because being a die-hard England fan, I just want to see them do well and play great rugby, be entertained, all of that sort of things. So if you think I'm getting a bit too emotional rather than trying to be a bit more objective, please let me know. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Anyway, plenty of people, and at times including myself, have definitely held on to the idea that Eddie Jones has a higher plan, a master plan, and the substandard rugby we've seen over the last couple of years will all start to make sense very soon. But that veil has been slipping away fairly quickly for me throughout the year, as you probably know, and I think it was the last straw against South Africa where many who are still believing in Eddie, if you like, actually saw through it a bit and realised they're just a bit of a mess, it's just not working, and this master plan isn't to play rubbish and then suddenly come good right at the end. However, I'm very happy to eat my words if England go on with the same sort of team and the same sort of tactics and win the Rugby World Cup. Fantastic. But if England are going to go on and maybe even win the World Cup, I think they're going to need quite a lot of personnel changes, quite a big tactical and strategic change, maybe even a coach change, but that's a video for another day. We will get onto that. Now, before I get onto it, and it sounds a bit too much like a rant, which I'm trying to not make it sound like, there could be a couple of caveats for England, for Eddie, to kind of soften the blow, if you like. Now, I think maybe if you ask Eddie deep down, maybe after he's finished coaching for England, I think maybe he's been a bit disappointed with what he perceives as a lack of talent in England. Whether it's true or not, I think that's a different question. But I've certainly read somewhere he's looked at over maybe 180 players. I certainly haven't gone and counted them, but he's looked at loads of players, and many have just come into camp for a bit, then gone again. Some players who probably never really had the talent, he thought he saw something, came in and they went. Some got some caps, and some who did have some talent came and went, and maybe just with a few caps. So he's gone through a huge amount of players, and I just don't think he'd have done that if he'd come across players he thought were really good enough. So if we were to mount a defence, I think he might be a little disappointed with the talent pool at the moment. England's always going to have a lot of players, and with the number of players they have, they're going to get some sort of decent team out. And maybe we're not quite in the golden era of talent. Maybe that is true. However, I think there's plenty of talent out there if you go looking for it for sure. Some of it's pretty obvious as well. And caveat number 2 is some of the new players he's tried, which isn't too many, haven't really come good for him. Van Poortvliet hasn't performed as we'd liked. Coles, Freeman haven't really hit the ground running. So I'm just giving him a few outs there as well. Let me know if you think they're fair or not. Okay, let's go through a number of factors that could be contributing to England's mess they're in at the moment. Let's talk about assistant coaching. Now, certainly last World Cup cycle was a completely different thing. Eddie was a new guy. Now, when assistant coaches do so well, it is going to be hard to keep hold of them because they're going to be in demand, and that's fair enough. But definitely there's been plenty of reports that Eddie's really hard to work for. He's a real taskmaster, and it's very much his ship that he rules. I'll refer back to that interview I did with Martin Gleeson, which really highlighted the fact it is Eddie's team. I asked him straight out, and he was super honest and said, yeah, I have some influence, but it's Eddie's team. Now, he probably knew this, so that's fair enough. That's just professional contracts and agreements. Now, if you've been a coach at any sort of level, you know that's incredibly dispiriting, even if you know it's coming. Let's say you're a forwards coach and you don't have much say or any say in who's in your pack. You know, it's not much fun. Plus, you want players with certain attributes that can do the things you want them to do. So really, you want quite a lot of control and quite a lot of say in who is in your pack or backline or whatever it is, the whole team. Sure, the head coach gets the final say, but good coaching empowers good coaches, and part of that is by letting them have a big say in who plays. And I don't think the likes of Smith and Ryan of New Zealand are not getting big says in selection. So I just think that's bad coaching, to be honest. And it seems to be the case here. Now, one more case in point. We've got Seabold, who's going back to Australia to be a head coach in Rugby League. And fair play to him. You know, that's his dream job. He's from Rugby League. And if you get offered that sort of job, you're going to go. Now, of course, what you really want is to employ people who are really passionate about rugby union, ideally English as well, and they want to stay, and the pinnacle of their career is coaching in a World Cup in rugby union for England. But Eddie just doesn't have the luxury of picking those sorts of coaches because people just don't want to work for him and people are going to leave like that. So just don't be surprised when these coaches keep leaving, and it definitely doesn't help. Okay, let's talk about the way that Eddie treats the press and Just the gaslighting, it's getting too old now. Sure, he will say it is my fault, but he'll follow it up with plenty of statements that no one's going to believe. There's just no point saying. For example, after the South Africa game, he said we didn't play how we wanted, but yes, they did. They played a set-piece game, a high ball game, a physical game with a worse team against South Africa, who are potentially the best in the world at doing it, and they got badly beaten. That's exactly what they were trying to do. He said they weren't far away. Of course they're far away. He said they're improving. They're not improving. No one's believing this stuff, and it's getting thin. And I've been in press conferences, and you see my intro there, where journalists have asked perfectly good, polite questions, and Eddie's just turned around and said, that's a rubbish question. You're silly for asking it. It's rude, and it's just gaslighting, and he needs a bit more humility, I think. If you look at the way other coaches answer questions, like Andy Farrell, they're super honest to super honest questions. And really, I've just had enough of it. I wonder if you have too. Okay, let's get into players now, and Eddie's selection of slow-aging players who simply just wouldn't be selected for other teams. Now, I know there's lots of other attributes to players, experience, stuff like that, but speed and athleticism, as you're getting older, just goes down. It's plain and simple. And again, if you were to make it a nice, simple context, let's take the best teams in the world at the moment, who I think are France, Ireland, New Zealand and South Africa. Who would you take from the England team to play instead of their players? Genge maybe? A Toje maybe on a good day? I don't know. Maybe not any. Definitely not many. And it's pretty simple. If you want to beat those sorts of teams, which you will need to win a World Cup, you need a lot of players who are better than them or at least as good as them. And we just don't have them. It's pretty simple. It doesn't matter how good your system is. You're just not going to win if your players aren't up to scratch. And tell me if I'm mistaken. I just don't think they are. Then let's discuss the Smith and Farrell access thing. 210s, yeah, potentially could work. We've seen Ford and Farrell work quite well. But let's just compare who they're giving the ball to if they do play the system well. In the 2019 World Cup, they were giving the ball to Manu Tuolangi in his absolute prime. They were giving the ball to Watson and May, who are two of the quickest wingers in the world at the time, and a very quick fullback in Elliot Daly at the back, potentially. Fine, if you're going to take up two slots using 210s, that's the sort of firepower you need outside. But now they're trying to do the same, not as well, I may add, and giving it to May, who's just a shadow of himself, Noel Stewart, Porter, Tuolangi, maybe using Farrell as a runner. He's not going to cut it. Not at any level. It's just not quick enough. It's not good enough. And this obsession with Smith and Farrell is getting painful. If you're going to do it, you've got to give him the weapons to make it work. And he's not. Both have good attributes and both have done some good stuff individually in this series, actually. But with that sort of team and with these sorts of tactics, especially the ones against South Africa, you didn't need 210s to move the ball quickly. You can have a 15 come in and do it. You can have other players come and do it. You can have a proper 12 who's actually got the skills to do it, and it's getting painful. And that leads on to another little point where Eddie Jones seems very afraid of picking players to do what they do well rather than what they can't. For example, we had Alex Dombrandt playing really well for Harlequins the last few weeks, not brought into the England team, and he's just by far the most talented number 8 in England, just miles ahead of Billy Vunipola in pretty much every level. Jack Willis he could have used more. There's definitely rumours that because he's changing clubs and going to France for a bit, he's in a bit of a tricky spot, but I'm sure he would have played. If you want more attacking in the back row, Ben Earl's been absolutely on fire. If you want backs that can create some speed, we've got Radwan and Murley. Fair enough, Arundel wasn't fit. You've got Ollie Lawrence in the centres. You've got Alex Mitchell at scrum half. And he's not trusting these guys and giving them a go. And you never know till you give them a go. It's very conservative. And the last point I'm going to make here is that the fans are important. You've got to take the fans with you. And the Twickenham crowd is bored. When I was there versus Japan, even though England played well, they literally sighed when the team was read out at the beginning, and when the subs came on, they were like, oh, this is the most boring set of subs we've ever heard. They're trying to get behind their team, but they're not being given anything to get behind at the moment. And a good debate I was having with Zach actually is it okay for fans to pay to see 4 years of substandard rugby if they are going to get a good World Cup every 4 years? And my opinion is no. Life's too short for that. The Six Nations is too important to experiment with them. Now, I don't really like the fact that England are being used as a big experiment just to get good every 4 years, maybe. Now, the RFU has kept backing Eddie with this strategy and signed off on it, basically saying we will sacrifice everything if we win the World Cup. And I don't think that's right. I think fans need more than that. We play, coach and watch rugby because it's exciting, because it's fun, and just waiting 4 years maybe to win the World Cup, I don't think it's good enough, to be honest. Love to know your thoughts on that. Now, what seems evident and is potentially the definition of insanity is to carry on with the same selections, the same strategies, and expect different results. But I'm going to stop there. I'd love to know all your thoughts on where England are right now and what they need to do to turn this around, and I'll catch you next time.